Welcome, everyone. My name is Greg Mannix. I'm Chief Conference Officer at Life Science Nation and VP of Business Development. Today, we are offering a fundraising bootcamp where we will speak about several important aspects of raising money, including a demonstration of the LSN investor database. Then we'll talk about fundraising during the COVID crisis, some metrics, what we've seen with our digital conferences. And then my colleague, Eric White, will talk about some strategies for successful partnering. And I just wanted to let you know that we will be taking questions at the end. Feel free to write your questions in the chat of this meeting. And at the end, we will discuss those points. So I would like to introduce Dennis Ford, who is founder and CEO of Life Science Nation. And Dennis, go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Greg. Welcome, everybody. I'm here in Hopkinton, Massachusetts, which is where the marathon starts, about 27 miles from Boston. Greg's over in Somerville. So we're all coming to you from these different locations, and it's glad to be able to chat with you. We have a lot of ground to cover, so we'll probably be talking pretty fast, but if you have any questions, just go into that chat box and please feel free to ask them. And Greg, can you get to the next slide, please? As you see there, a little bit about Life Science Nation and what our company looks like. We basically have two databases. One is a database of early stage technology assets from around the world. So we have about 55,000 companies that we track, and we sell that data to pharmaceutical companies and to CROs and other folks that are trying to track the early stage marketplace. And you'll hear me use this phrase called the 4 Ds. And the 4 Ds are drugs, devices, diagnostics, and digital health. So we have a database that tracks early stage companies across the silos of drugs, devices, diagnostics, and digital health. And then we have another database, which we call the investor database. And we have 10 categories of global investors that we track. And we sell that to fundraising CEOs so that they can easily get a list of global investors that's a fit for their stage of development in their product set. We also have this conference that we do called the RESI conference. If you haven't heard of it, we actually are doing our 3rd digital one on the 8th of June, which is Monday, and we'll be running the 8th through the 10th. And Greg and Eric will be chatting a lot about that tonight. So the RESI conference is important because we took about 6 years to develop this, and it's a pure early stage partnering and investor conference. So a fundraising CEO can go to a RESI conference, and if they get their branding and messaging correct and they reach out to their investors, they can do anywhere from 8 to 16 meetings a day. And in this particular one we're having next week, you could do, multiply that times 3 because it's going to be over 3 days. We also have a accelerator that we call Focus on Cures, which is kind of an immersion class for fundraising CEOs where they can come to Boston for a week, and we'll help them with their branding and messaging. We'll help them get a list of global investors that are a fit for them. We'll get their CRM up and running. We'll get their intro and their email canvassing down, and we'll help them get wired into a RESI conference. So we're introducing a new conference called 4D Meets AI in September, and then we have a broker-dealer iBank called Boston Innovation Capital, where we will do fundraisers for particular companies that need our assistance. Last year, we did a $25 million raise for a company called Thermalin that had a refrigerated insulin product. Greg, if we can go to the next slide, please. So the 3 most important questions, when you're going in front of an investor, they're going to ask you, are you raising capital? And a lot of people, funny as it may seem, if somebody asks them if they're raising capital, they're not quite sure. And you want to know for sure that you're raising capital, and you probably want to have a good idea of how much. And then there's always a question of, how long it takes. And, more often than not, when we talk to fundraising CEOs and scientists, entrepreneurs, they tell us that they think it's 6 to 9 months. And what we have found, if you can do it in 6 to 9 months, it's great. But we don't see that happening a lot. What we see is usually 9 to 18. So planning accordingly is really important. And then, what's it really take to do a fundraise? So, we have 24 people here today, and, you have to get your marketing material done. You've got to go to these conferences where you can meet the investors that are a fit for your stage of development in your product. We used to be able to go out on these road trips, which have been canceled. And you typically want to go get a database that gives you a list of investors. And then you've got to do all the other things that you have to do as you're starting your company. So we basically, back of the envelope, is it costs $60,000 to $90,000, and that's not good news for a fundraising CEO who doesn't have that type of money. We've actually written a book on the subject, and I hope Eric had a chance to send you a copy of it. But we go through a lot of the functions and processes that you need to be aware of in getting a fundraising campaign together in that book. And if you don't have it, you can reach out to either Eric, Greg, or myself, and we'll be happy to send you a copy. Next slide, Greg. So, the good news is when we started the company a while ago, everybody kind of thought it's like we go get our tech transfer license from the university, we go get some government grants from NIH or SBIR, and then we go and try and find some friends and family or angel money, and then after that we'll go find a VC, and hopefully after that we'll go find a partner, either a medical device or a drug company that'll do a licensing deal or buy us. And so in the last 8 years, in the particular last 5 years, the market has really changed. And so of course, large pharma and biotech are still out there, but there's also new groups. You see Google and Microsoft and Amazon, and there's corporate venture everywhere. And then the private equity folks and the hedge funds are involved, and then you go out to another group of folks that are the family offices, the foundations, the venture philanthropists, and the patient groups. And then there's the VCs, and people would think it's the only option, but actually it's one of the options. And some of the VCs do go early, and we have a lot of global early stage VCs that come to the RESI conference. And then of course we have a lot of angels, and the angel groups are forming syndicates these days, so you can get a little bit higher allocations in cash from them. And then of course there's the family and friends. So there's 10 categories of investors that we track in our database, and we have about 6 research analysts that have been curating this database for about 8 years. And so it's really important to us that we talk to each of the investor categories, and we do an interview with them every 6 months to find out what's going on. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward tonight. Next slide, Greg. So one of the things that we all have to learn about when we're thinking of actively going out for fundraising is this concept called fit. And fit is really important, because if you're going to an investor that has an investment mandate and they spend a lot of time and they say, I'm looking for companies that have a small molecule for oncology, especially in breast cancer, and they're looking for someone preclinical IND or phase 1, and you're a fit, the chances of reaching out to them and having a good conversation and getting a meeting arranged are a lot higher than if you're not a small molecule, if you're a medical device, a diagnostic, or a digital health, because it's not a fit. And so what we see happening a lot as we travel around the world to incubators and accelerators is you go to an incubator and there's this master list. There's a master list of an Excel spreadsheet, and everybody in the incubator is using it, and no one's updated the Excel spreadsheet of all these investors, and everybody just goes out and does a shotgun approach, and they don't really get a lot of meetings and a lot of response. So what we call that is, an untargeted list. And, you can get a 1 or 2% response from an untargeted list, but if you took that Excel spreadsheet that's, sitting in all these incubators, and you went and did some research for a couple of months and updated the spreadsheet, and you said, okay, I'm going to go after all of the companies that I know that are looking for small molecules for oncology, you're really going to do a lot better, and you'll probably get 5 to 15%. But if you really do it high targeted, which is small molecule for oncology for breast cancer, and you go find those folks, and you are a company that is that, then you're a direct fit. And so you really see these incredible, we call them hit rates, when you reach out to someone, they open your email, and then they return either a call or will allow you to set up a meeting, up to 20 or 50%. So, this is all sales 101, marketing BD stuff. And so if you're a scientist entrepreneur and you're, trying to figure it out, it can be a little bit daunting, but, it's basically list management. And you've got to get a list of people that are a fit for your stage of development and your product set, and then you'll do really well as you go after them. So, Greg, if you could go to the next slide, please. So we have this database that we curate, and I'm a data person. I come from the data world, and so I have a saying that data comes in 2 states: out of date and very out of date. And so that's the problem with data, and that's why when you get these Excel spreadsheets with investors on them, you really got to do your best before you send out stuff to do a little bit of research. So as I said earlier, we have a 6 full-time staff that for 8 years have been calling these investors up and interviewing them, asking them about their allocation information, how big is their fund? We have this term AUM, assets under management. How much dry powder do you have left? If you have a $100 million fund, how much have you already invested and what do you have left? We call that the dry powder. And then what sectors of interest and the company management team requirements. So a lot of these investors have really thought about what they're looking for, and they really understand the marketplace. So if you go after an investor and you can really learn about what they're up to, it can make you a lot more impactful when you reach out to them. And then what's really interesting about our mandates, we ask the investor, can you please tell us, how do we go about reaching you? Do you want us to call you? Do you want us to email you? Do you have a person that we should reach out to? And so the investor gives a message to our researchers, which we will add inside the mandate, and you can see at the bottom of that particular mandate that it says, let them know that you're an LSN partner, send an email to this guy, and this is how you do it, or this person. So that's one of the ways that makes, canvassing and getting meetings really, really powerful. Greg, could you go to the next slide, please? So, one of the things that we've developed, and a little bit out of, kind of what we're all about, is we wanted to develop a methodology that's a process that's kind of integrated into our infrastructure that's dedicated to helping early stage companies raise money. And so, the methodology works. And one of the things that's funny is when we go to these different accelerators and incubators around the world, North America, Europe, and China, and Asia, there's always, somebody that has the mentorship responsibility, and everybody's giving everybody this information, and it's not really standardized, and there's no real format, and it can be really frustrating because you can go to these incubators and you can see their pitch sessions and how things work, and everybody's kind of doing it a different way. And so we have a really standard way of how you get your story straight, how you get your branding and messaging straight. And it all starts by developing a unique, compelling storyline, and then understanding how to take that story and tell it in a lucid and cogent way, so that your branding and messaging, when you send it out, it looks like you've really done a lot, and it's really easy to understand who you are, what your value is, what your product is. And then one of the other things we do is, we have a database of 5,000 investors growing across 10 categories of investors, but we want you to be able to go into that database and go find 500, 600, or 700 investors around the world that are a fit for you. And that global target list is kind of who you should be engaging with and who you should be spending your time reaching out to. And so then once you get a list, well, you need to move it, out of an Excel spreadsheet, because even though we talk to a lot of scientists, entrepreneurs who love Excel spreadsheets, you really can't properly track 500 or 800 global investors with a spreadsheet. You really need to get a CRM that teaches you how to track, and you can keep track of all your information, what you've given them, what your conversations have been, what the next steps are. So we usually, recommend Salesforce.com because it's just easy for everybody to use. And then, when you're launching a global campaign, how do you really think out, how are you going to do your introductory email, and how are you going to do your phone canvassing? And so, we want to teach fundraising CEOs and scientist entrepreneurs how to do that. But a lot of the time, some people want to do that and learn that skill, and other people, it's nice that they tried, but they're really not, ready to do that. And so then we recommend, you can go after and find somebody that can take that global target list and set up the meetings for you, because that's really the most important part, setting up the meetings and then following up. And, everybody kind of falls down when it comes to setting up the meetings, and everybody really falls down when it comes to follow-up. And follow-up is really the thing that breaks you as far as being successful in a fundraising campaign or not. So we've helped about 300 companies raise over 400 million. And if you divide that, it's not like we're only doing seed funds, because we have people that have raised over 20 million, and we have people that have raised around 250,000. And we have a list of folks if you guys would like to take a look at it. And Greg, you can send me to the next slide, please. So, basically we do these conferences with investors, and we have about 2,000 investors that follow us around the planet. And they typically go to 2 or 3 or more of our conferences a year. And so if you're a fundraising CEO, you can start to follow us around. And the problem is that you don't want to go to one conference and then wait your next year to go to your next one. So every couple of months we have a conference. We started at JPM in Union Square in San Francisco in January, and we have a hotel that we rented there for the last 6 years now. And we have a really big investor conference that we put on there during the week of JP Morgan. We then go from there to Europe. We were in Vienna last year, and we were going to be in March this year, but we got waylaid by the C-19 troubles. So we turned it into this digital event. And when we turned it into a digital event, we basically doubled our attendees, because when everybody heard it was digital, they all signed up, and we had 100 more investors and 100 more fundraising CEOs. So we had our first pivot to a digital event, and it worked. And then we typically go back to Boston, which is, back to San Diego in June for Bio, but that got canceled. So we're running our 3-day conference next week in the cloud. And we've already got over 450 investors signed up, and we have about 350 fundraising CEOs. So we actually have more investors coming to our investor conference than we have fundraising CEOs. And, going there, the job is to get in front of as many investors as you can over the next 3 days. We have a partnering system. It's easy to log in. It's easy to put your profile in. It's easy to send messages. So, we go from West Coast, JP Morgan, to Europe, back to Bio, up to Boston in September, and then over to Shanghai and Taipei, Taiwan in November. And so every couple of months, you can hop onto a RESI conference, and you can start a new conversation with an investor, or you can go find an existing investor you talk to and give them an update on what data or how much progress you've made going forward in some of the milestones you're trying to reach. So this infrastructure, it was really hard to build, and it's global in nature, and it's really made for fundraising CEOs like you, so that you can easily get in without paying a fortune. You don't have to pay $4,000 to go to one of our conferences. It's usually way under $1,000. And you can get in, and you can meet a bunch of investors, and then you can keep on going every couple of months. And so you're not just doing 1 or 2 conferences a year, and you're basically really working a system that can be fruitful for you. So as you see this infrastructure here, we put all sorts of things on top of it. We have a global family office bio forum of about 400 family offices that regularly come to us. We're creating a 4D Meets AI conference that we're going to put beside the RESI conference. So there's a lot of things that you can take advantage of. Next slide, Greg. So, we're here to give a fundraising boot camp, and one of the things we wanted to be able to do today was kind of, talk about some of the myths about fundraising, that people get some bad advice when they're going around in the marketplace. And the first one, that, funding choices are limited to SBIR grants, friends, families, and angels, VCs, and, and strategics. There's really 10 categories of investors, and when you're going for what we call seed, which is $250K to $2 million, and then Series B, $2 million to $10 million, Series A, $2 million to $10 million, and B, $10 million to $50 million. These are the types of investors that go to our conferences. And so you want to be able to go after all of the different categories that are a fit for you. And the fit, once again, is your stage of development in your product set. One of the things that we find that really limits folks is when you limit yourself to your regional players, because, at the end of the day, for anyone who's raising money, it's a pure numbers game. When you're, it's just like being in the lab and you're doing experiments to get data. I mean, you're going to have hundreds of experiments and they're all going to fail, but you're just looking for a couple to give you some data and give you an indication. And so it's kind of like that when you get into the sales, marketing, and BD space. In the regional environment, if you just do the math and you say, like, I'm on the West Coast from Seattle, Portland, down through California, and you count all of the investors that are a fit for you, it might be a good amount, 75 or 100. But then if you go to North America, it's going to double or triple. And then if you add Europe, it's going to double or triple. And then if you go to Asia or Pac Rim or China, it's going to double or triple. So your job is to get out of the region and get into the global fray, because there are a lot of investors that are looking for you, and they're not regional investors. So there are regional investors like regional angel groups and regional family offices, but there's also institutional investors who are early stage that, they don't have any borders, and they go find what they're looking for. And so you don't want to be missed by them. Next slide, Greg. We talked a little bit about people thinking, how long does it take to raise money? I like to plan 9 months to 18 months so that, you have a realistic plan, and then you get into, well, how much am I raising? And a lot of times people say, I just want to just get a little bit of money to get me through the next year. And they're asking for, not a lot, a couple of million or less. And, what they really need to do is say, what do I really need for 24 months or 36 months? Because one of the strange facts of raising money is that it takes the same amount of time to raise 250 as it does to raise 5, as it does to raise 15. And so it's a lot better for you to be able to take the time and figure out really what you need. And then there's a lot of issues when you start to go into the market that we are in, which is what I call institutional investors. They don't want to just get like a small 250K or $1 million. They want to get a significant piece of the equity that they can invest in. And so when you're asking for too small amounts of money, you're going below the bar that they need to get to is much higher in order to make it worthwhile for them. So, there's some kind of, subtleties in like thinking about, how much time are you going to spend doing it? How much are you looking for? And you don't want to go raise like a small amount of money and then you spend it in a year, and now you got to go spend another, 12 to 18 months to go get more money when you could have done everything in one fell swoop. And, today, traditionally, when we see these deals, there's a bunch of investors in the deal and they're tranching the money based on milestones. And so, kind of understanding how the landscape works could be quite helpful. And, number 4 here, understanding each category of investor and how they work. Going out, finding the list of people that are a fit for your stage of development in your product set, and then going find those 500 to 700 investors, and then really taking the time to get to know who are all the family offices, who are all the PE, who are all the VC, who are all the corporate farmers and strategic, and really understanding who the players are. it just prepares yourself a lot better. Next slide, Greg. Science and technology is the only thing that matters. So, we do a lot of branding and messaging and helping scientists get ready for their campaigns. And, they're always coming back, pulling us back to, let me tell you more about the science. And the science is great and it's super important. But when you're an early stage company, the team, the founder, what the technology is trying to do, the data, that's the stuff that, really people are trying to understand. And a lot of times we find that the scientist just really wants to dig down into the science and keep on going and going and going. And we have to pop them up a level and just say, really, the people, they're interested in you. Like, how did you get here? How did you find the technology? Tell us about the passion. Tell us about how you got your team together. Tell us about what's so special about your technology and where it's going. So a lot of the things is that we think that the investors are thinking one thing and we're kind of guiding our messaging to them, but actually if you don't have it right, you're not giving them the right amount of information. And then the other one that we see quite a lot is if someone has a platform and they're going like, I can do MS, I can do Parkinson's, I can do Alzheimer's, I can do CNS, and they're just throwing a lot of information to an investor. And most of these investors, they're not looking for platforms. There are companies that are looking for platforms like big pharma companies, but maybe there's 120. But if you're looking for, if you have something in the CNS realm that's Parkinson's, there might be 800 investors. So really understanding, don't limit yourself and don't try and, sell somebody who's looking for Parkinson's that you can also do MS or you can also do Alzheimer's, because they want to put 100% of their money behind a particular indication that they've decided they want to invest in. And when you come and tell them you've got all of these different indications and diseases that you can solve problems for, they want to put 100% of their money into Parkinson's. And they don't want to have you working 30% on Parkinson's and 70% on other indications. So just kind of thinking all that stuff through is how we like to help. You need to be referred to an investor in order to get a meeting. This is one of the myths that really drive me crazy because, a couple of slides ago, we were talking about warm fit. When someone tells you what they're looking for, that's called self-declared information. And self-declared information is the highest form of data. So if somebody knows an investor and they can they can actually help you and get you into a meeting, that's the best thing in the world. But if you count on that, you're not going to have a lot of meetings. So the second best thing in the world is what I call a warm lead, which is you find an investor who self-declared his information to a company like us so that we can get the information to you and you can say, I read your mandate, I know what you're looking for, I have a small molecule for breast cancer and this is where we're at. And that person is going to take some time and find you. So we call that a warm lead. But, you can pick up the phone or send an email to anybody you want. And when people tell you you can't, you really can't listen to them because we see it at our conferences, people getting 25 and 45 meetings, and they've never met these investors before. Next slide, Greg. Greg, are we going okay? So the next thing is over sending too much information. We really, if you're an investor and we talk to them every week, they tell us that they're getting 100 requests. So if you get 100 requests for a meeting and everybody's throwing all this data at you and all this information, it's really hard to parse it. So we found that investors are really appreciative when they can figure out what's this person's tagline and it tells exactly what they're doing, and an elevator pitch that tells exactly what they're doing. And they can decide just by reading a tagline or an elevator pitch, which is a couple of sentences, that they would like to meet with you. And, so there's just kind of, people are not thinking correctly. They're thinking if I could just show as much technology as I can, the guy's going to look at me, but he doesn't have that much time. So you've got to figure out how to net it out so that he wants to take his time slice and spend with you. And, the other side is, the scientists are the rock stars and business and finance is just the Me Too thing. Science is a universe unto itself. Finance is a universe unto itself. Business development and fundraising, they're all universes unto themselves. So some scientists want to learn that stuff and others don't. And if they know who they are to begin with, then it's really good, because then they can fill in their team and they can be, really good at what they do, and they can find other people that can help them. Next slide, Greg. So the last one here is the science is the hard part and the business is the easy part. You'll find that it's really tedious, time-consuming. You really need to focus and spend. It's a full-time job to raise money, and so when people try to do it part-time, it can be really frustrating because you're not going to see some results. And we meet fundraising CEOs, every week, and we help them with their branding and messaging, and we help them kind of move their headspace into getting more oriented into what they have to do to go and raise money. Next slide, Greg. And now I'm going to turn it over to Greg.
Okay, so we're just going to show you very quickly how we would identify investors that are a fit for any given project. Just a second. Okay. So as Dennis mentioned earlier, you need to have a target list of investors, and that needs to be a global target list. And we're tracking investors literally from all over the world. Of course, there are a lot of investors from the United States. That doesn't surprise anybody, but there are a lot of investors from places like China, from places like Germany and France, or other Asia Pacific countries that you really need to be thinking about. We're also tracking 10 categories of investors. If someone could mute themselves, that would be great. Okay. 10 categories of investors. So not just VCs, not just angel groups. There are other investors who are very relevant to early stage funding today, like family offices, like corporate VCs, like large pharma, even some foundations and endowments. So what about fit? So you want to find investors who are looking for your particular type of technology and stage of development. So if we were to do a sample search for a drug development company, say doing a small molecule for an indication like, for example, oncology, and then we can say in what stage of development, say, preclinical to phase 1, kind of in that space, and if we did a broad search, we'll get a large number, over 700 potential investors, okay, from around the world. So you'll see kind of the types of investors. Here's a VC from Silicon Valley, a VC from China, corporate VC from Germany, VC from the UK, here's a VC from San Francisco, et cetera, et cetera. So if we have a look at this VC from San Francisco, for example, 5AM Ventures, you get kind of some general information about the investor, their assets under management and where they're located and such. But the in-depth information is here. Dennis mentioned this earlier. This is unique because it's taken in a personal interview by one of my colleagues. In this case, it's my colleague Jessica. You can see up here. And you get this key information that is really useful to you, like this investor invests from seed to Series A. So you know exactly what space they're investing in. They save about $25 million to invest in any given company over the life of the company, and they're looking to make 5 allocations a year. You can also see some of the indication areas that they're interested in. This particular investor is what we call opportunistic. They'll look at a lot of different indications, but here you get an idea of the kinds of technologies they're looking for. And then very importantly, you get this message from the investor here where the investor is telling you how they want to be contacted. So this particular investor, the person to reach out to is Jason Ruth, who's attending our conference next week. Jason, there's his email, and you should mention LSN. So this is not a cold outreach. That's very important. This is an investor who knows that they will be contacted by companies through our database, and if you see that you are potentially a fit, they will be happy to have a look. So that's what the database looks like. Just to give you an idea of another type of investor, large pharma. So if you're doing an oncology asset, AbbVie, big pharma from Chicago, you can see here clearly that they do both venture investments, licensing, collaborations, M&A. Nothing surprising there from a big pharma company, but it's good to know what types of investments they might make. And here you can see that oncology is a main focus of this particular company, of AbbVie. And same thing, you have a message from the investor telling you for oncology, the person to reach out to is this person here, very clear. And then you have, for all of the investors, you have a contact tab where you can see other key players at this investment firm, their emails and phone numbers. So that's the way the database works. It's a really powerful tool. You can download the searches to Excel format so that you can then upload it to a CRM program, which is definitely a good idea if you're managing hundreds of investor contacts. And you can also set up email alerts, for example, whenever a new investor is added that fits your criteria. So a lot of great things. It really will save you a lot of time and allow you to develop a really powerful target list of investors to go after. Okay, so we're going to go back to the presentation. Dennis.
Great, thank you. Great, thank you, Greg. And please, anybody who's listening, if you have any questions at all, just use the chat, and then we'll answer your questions after we do the presentation. And they're all good questions, and so we're really here to help you folks in any way we can as you go forward in trying to raise money. So part of the methodology we have is that you really need to develop a compelling story about you and your company. And the whole point is that if you're going to be having a lot of meetings, you really want to kind of develop a story so when you sit down, you really have in mind what you want to get across to the investor. And so, mankind in general communicates through storytelling, and the challenge is spending, quality time really thinking about and crafting your own storyline. And so, we've divided it up, but, getting a narrative that's really easy for you, that it's your story and it's easy for you to tell, and your team can get, how did your team get coalesced around the technology? How did you create the company? What happened? Because these are the things that people really love to hear, and it gets their interest about, why you're so different. And so, like all good stories, it has to be, well thought out, and it should be simple enough that everybody can really describe who the heck the company is and what you guys are all about. And, it doesn't have to be deep technical stuff. You can always go do a deep dive anytime you want. But if you're going to go talk to a lot of people quickly, you want to kind of put them in context so that they get a really good idea of who you are. And if you're a fit, they're going to want to talk to you. Everybody has a unique personal story, and that's what makes, things great. And when you breathe life into your story and your passion is revealed, it's just really great. And that's what I think a lot of the investors are looking for. We have this problem. People think they're investing in the science, but they're really investing in the team. And they want to know who the founders are, and they want to know who the team is around the founders, and they want to see how everything works. And so, getting your story can really help, can really aid that process. Next slide, Greg. So, we start everything like, if you could just get your 5 or 6 words that describe your company correct, it'll just really save everybody a lot of time. a lot of investors tell us they just read the tagline. It's all they need to see. They want to talk to the team. So people have these crazy, vague, inspired innovation and focus on health and the future of oncology. And it's just so vague that nobody knows what the heck you're doing. They can't tell, are you a device, a diagnostic, a digital health, a drug? They don't know. And then people get very generalized and they're talking about, next generation protein therapeutics or, microscopic imaging at point of care, but yet, they're still just not really on it. So there are other companies that spend some time and they say, okay, we're a first-in-class serotonin receptor modulators for treating Fragile X. So anybody who's interested in autism that sees what these guys are doing are going to know that they're toggling serotonin receptors in the brain because that's their marketplace and they understand what's going on. And so these guys might surface as somebody that's really good for them to talk to, and they did it really quickly with like a couple of words. So people really have to decide how they can describe their core value in a couple of words. And if you think about that and you get it straight and we're willing to help, just give us a call. We're really good at it. And you see the other one, like mine, enabling precision diagnosis and treatment of tremor and dementia disorders. So, there it is again, somebody who's into dementia is going to kind of want to know what these guys are doing, and they've really helped. So let's go to the next slide, Greg. So here are two examples. We were just dealing with this great company called Reglogene, and their tagline before was cancer medicines that reverse therapy resistance. And once again, when I got the CEO on the forum going, I don't understand what you're doing. You've got to get something that that can really say who you are and what you do. And so after going back and forth about 20 times, it takes about 20 revs to get one of these correct. We focused on epigenetic medicines regulating cancer genes. And so it's like, okay, now we know they're in the genetic world and that they're modulating, gene expression. And that's a big field today with CRISPR and a bunch of other things that's out there. So just in a few words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they're able to kind of put themselves into place where if an investor is into genetic oncology, they can immediately understand what these guys are doing. And then it turns out when we then go to their elevator pitch, they really thought a lot about that. And it turns out that gene expression creates either too much or too little proteins. And when that happens, it creates a disease called cancer. And these guys have figured out how to modulate proteins through gene expression. And they can talk about it in a couple of sentences. So being able to net it out that crisp, he went to our RESI conferences before, and he would typically get like 6 or 7 meetings, and which is good. And he also got an investment for $600,000, a seed investment. But he said his inner voice was saying, I'm doing it, but I'm not doing it right. And so he came to us and he said, can we do this better? And I said, yeah, we can. And so he took all this information that we gave him, and then he wound up getting 25 meetings at the next RESI conference. And then 2 of the meetings, he had such a good conversation that the farmers went into his data room and are currently doing some due diligence on him. So, that's, kind of where we want to get everybody. We want to get you so that you can get your message straight, that it's compelling, it really nets out your value, and you can put it in front of somebody and they see it and they go, I should talk to these guys. Because all of the work you're doing with your branding and your messaging and your collateral and all of the work, it's just to get a meeting. And it seems crazy that you're spending months preparing and all this money to get your collateral right and buy databases and go to conferences just to get a meeting, but that's how it starts. So here's NanoPin, which is another really cool company that we've been working with. And before they were using novel infectious disease solutions. So once again, really general, and you don't know what they're doing, but it turns out that, if you do their TB diagnostic, and if they do blood versus mucus, they instead of weeks, they can get something done in hours. And because they're using nanoparticle detection of peptide particles, which are common in TB, they're really like changing the whole dynamic. And so they basically, we worked with them, and it takes about 20 iterations going back and forth, but we finally said early and acute detection of TB antigens in the blood. So if somebody's into TB for third world as part of their marketplace, and they want to know who these guys are, and they're looking for a TB diagnostic, bam, they get it in just a couple of words. And, you know, then it turns out because of nanotechnology and proteomic platforms, they're really able to take advantage of the technology advancements and triangulate on doing some really cool stuff in the diagnostic world of TB. Next sentence, excuse me, next slide, Greg. So, you know, what we're talking about is, you know, netting out everything with your tear sheet, which is a one-pager. Next slide. And then getting your story straight with your executive summary, which is 2 pages. And, you know, we've got a book we've written on it. We really go into lots of details that, you know, shows you how to do it. Eric or I or Greg will be happy to send anybody out there a copy of the book. And if you just take this and go through this process, this methodology, it'll really help get your branding and messaging straight. Next. So, you know, we've talked about your pitch deck. If you get your story straight, your pitch deck starts with the first 6 pages are just kind of recasting your story, and the second 6 pages are really doing a deeper dive into your IP. And, you know, once again, we're all doing this just to get a message to the investors to get in front of them with just the first meeting. Next slide, Greg. Okay, great. So I think we're off then.
Yeah, so I just wanted to briefly explain what's going on in the current situation in terms of fundraising and meeting with investors. So, you know, how is this pandemic affecting fundraising? You know, you can't travel, all the conferences are being canceled, there are no networking events, you can't have a face-to-face meeting with anyone. So, you know, some people asked me recently, has fundraising come to a halt? Is everything slowing down? And the answer is absolutely not. And I just want to tell you our own story about how we pivoted and what the result was, because I think it's very indicative of what's going on. We were planning this conference in Paris, as we mentioned earlier. 2 weeks before the conference, we had to cancel. It became clear in France that it wouldn't be possible to have a conference in a hotel with several hundred people. And we decided to pivot, and we called it Digital RESI Europe. We kept the Eiffel Tower on the banner because it was, you know, planned to be in Paris. And from there, we're now doing our RESI San Diego conference, but we're just calling it simply Digital RESI. And the reason for that is because what has happened with these conferences that used to have a regional focus, although they always were international, but they did have a regional focus. Now they've become completely global. And just as an example, when we announced that RESI Paris was going digital, we had literally hundreds of partners from Asia, from the Asia Pacific region, who weren't planning on traveling to Paris because they couldn't. We were in the middle of the worst of the pandemic in Asia. When they realized they could participate from home, they were very enthusiastic about it. And like Dennis mentioned, you know, the numbers have just gone up and up because people are joining from all over the world. There's no travel limitations. The cost of travel, which is a big impediment for many early stage companies, is no longer an issue. You can attend from anywhere without, you know, the expenses of hotel and travel. So now, instead of a face-to-face meeting, you're still meeting in person, but it's through a video conferencing app that is built into our platform. And you know, like I mentioned earlier, we were up to 1,400 meetings going on in over 3 days at our last conference. And the way what we're seeing now for the conference next week, it will be well over 2,000 meetings taking place, mostly between investor and fundraising CEOs. So we're very excited about what's going on and the enthusiasm with which everybody is accepting this new reality. that looks like it will be around for the foreseeable future. We don't know, but nobody knows. But you can be very productive in this new digital conference format. You can meet a lot of great investors for your project. And just to show you at our last conference how the partnering activity literally was going on all over the world, and during different times of the day, you can see how the activity moved from one continent to another. It was really cool to be able to follow this, and we were very excited to see that. It literally was going on for 24 hours nonstop for 3 days. So just some numbers, and I'm going to move on so that my colleague Eric can say a few words about some strategies for successful fundraising.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, so, once you get your global list of targets, you can get it through our database, and, then you get your messaging and branding straight, you're telling your story, and then you want to, reach out to investors. You could do it at our conference, kind of, get in front of, get a list of about 130. And either way, it's the process. It's the process that, really matters at that point, and how far you're willing to go. Dennis threw up an example a little earlier ago of NanoPen, and NanoPen came to us 1 week before we did the digital March event that was supposed to be in Paris. And we got on the phone on Friday. We talked about the conference. I shared with him this methodology and this process. The next day he got started. He created his profile, and then on Sunday he sent out over 55 meeting requests. He woke up Monday morning. He had 3 meetings on the table. Then he sent out his follow-up the next day, and he did that throughout the week, and he ended up with in the ballpark of like 17, 19 meetings. And now he's on his way doing it again, except for after we did his messaging and branding, he started out with a list of 130 2 days ago. He sent out meeting requests to 130, and this morning he woke up and he had 5 meetings already on the table, and he's off on running on his second follow-up. So I want to tell you a little bit about how to do that. Can we go to the next slide, Greg? So, at RESI, we're going to have, next month, I think, in the ballpark of 450 global investors participating, and they're all taking meeting requests on the platform. And even if you got registered today, I don't think it's going to be too late, because there's plenty of availability in their schedules, and there's so many. I mean, we just added new ones this week. So you can see in this picture. I mean, this is obviously a live one. Where with all the investors, and now this is digitally, and it's even more. Can we go to the next slide? So the first part of going to a partnering event, is getting your profile created, because that's really the first opportunity you're going to get in front of an investor. So you want to use that profile to really, as I was saying earlier, tell your story. You want to get it right. You want it to be kind of on point, so you can quickly as possible tell them who you are and what you're doing. Investors use the platform to find companies, to source assets. So they'll be searching just as well as you're searching for investors, and they're going to come to your profile, and you're going to get about 3 minutes of their time. And if they can't really get who you are really quick, they're going to move on to go to the next company. So you want your profile to be kind of clear in telling your story, and then you want to prepare for the outreach. You want to prepare a intro message that you're going to be sending to your meeting requests to your list of targets. That again is just quickly as possible, introducing yourself and informing them what you're doing. And then you want to get a large list. Like I said, NanoPen back in March, he started with a list of I think it was like 70, and he ended up with 17, 19 meetings. This time around, he started off with a list of 130, and he already has 5 meetings on the books, and now he's starting up with his first follow-up. Can we move to the next slide? So again, the profile is really, you're going to have your tagline on it, and then you're going to have a brief overview, elevator pitch, 5 sentences. It really puts them in context. And then you're going to go down and like at RESI on our platform, the profile builder is really intuitive and really easy. We have each piece pretty clearly defined where you're going to put your information for, where you're going to put your logo, where you're going to put your website, where you're going to attach your deck or your executive summary, and then we're going to talk about your technology, your IP status, your recent milestones, your management team, and your fundraising needs. Next slide. Again, this is the first touch when you reach out to the investors. Your first message when you send out that meeting request. You don't want to just send the meeting request without putting any information on it. We on our platform we have it's real easy, a box where you can copy and paste your intro message that introduces your company, where you're located, what sector you're in, or your subsectors, the indications that you're looking at, your product stage of development, how much you're raising, those details in that first intro message. Can you go to the next slide? This is just an example of what we recommend using. When you're reaching out to investors, requesting a meeting, it's a real brief intro message that really quickly tells that investor what you're doing. It doesn't need to be much more than this. And we can share this with you as well if you want it. Just let me know and I can send it to you. We go to the next slide. So, Dennis mentioned an example earlier of a company that we're working with, Regulagine, and about a year ago, he came to about 5 RESIs, and he was just testing the waters. And I reached out to him last August. I noticed on the platform with about 2 weeks to go to RESI Boston, he only had a few meetings, and I thought that based on his technology, he should be doing a lot better. So I just gave him a call and I said, "Hey, Richard, what's going on here?" And he's like, "Well, I'm just sending out that meeting request with the intro message, and that's it. If they don't respond back, I'm moving on." And I'm like, "No, you got to follow up." And he's like, "Well, I don't want to be too persistent. I don't want to be too pushy. I don't want to scare him away." And I'm like, "Rich, it's like well, these investors know what's going on. They're getting hit with by a lot of requests from a lot of companies. So you really need to take this time to follow up and follow that process, so that you build a bigger case of why you're investable. And you're only going to do that by following up and sending, you send your intro message and then you follow up 3 to 4 times. And we can see here, that, based off of, who you start with and following that process, the larger the list that you're reaching out to, if you're sending that intro and you're following up, you're sending 3 or 4 follow-up messages, the more meetings you're going to get. And we can go right on the back end of our past 30 conferences, and we can clearly see that the companies that follow this process, this methodology, are the companies that, we do it in person, are getting 12, 16 meetings in one day. And then we go digitally, these are the companies that are getting between 20 and 40 meetings a day, or over 3 days. In fact, the digital event we did in March, there was a company that I think got 45 meetings in 3 days. And then Richard got over 25 meetings in 2 days last month. So the process, sticking to the methodology and the process works, and it will get you a lot of meetings. Can we move along? And I can't stress again that, it's really in the follow-up. That's where the bulk of the meetings come. Digitally, where we're at right now, I'm seeing where if companies, start off with a list of, at least 50 of target investors, they're ending up with, 2 to 3 meetings just by doing that and sending their request to me. And that's if their messaging and branding's right too. But then, with Nanokin is a clear example. He just sent out over 130. He got 5 just from doing that. But the bulk of it's going to come again in the follow-up, and you have to be persistent. You have to send that follow-up, and it can be really easy. You get that, as we showed before, the introduction message that introduces your company to the investor, and then you take your 3 or 4 follow-up messages. In the first one, you just focus really on your technology, nothing else, and you keep it about less than 3 minutes. And then your second follow-up, you focus on your market or the unmet medical need and what your competitors are doing. And then on your third follow-up, you focus on your management team and who you are. And then your fourth follow-up, you send them, you can either do it by email or embedding a link in the platform, your one-page tear sheet, which is like a fact sheet. And at that point, when they get that tear sheet, you're making the case, you're following up, you're showing that you're persistent, you're showing that you're hardworking, and then you're giving that tear sheet and all that facts on there, that information is all they need to see to make the determination if you're investable or not. And that's where you're going to get the bulk of your meetings from following that. Our two examples from earlier, Nanopin followed that in March, that process, and he got somewhere between 17, 19 meetings across 3 days. Richard followed that process, and in 2 days last month, he got over 25. And we can go into our platform again in every conference that we've done, and we can clearly show that the companies who has their story, they're telling their story right, they can clearly get in front of the investor and tell them what they're doing, and then they can follow this process of reaching out and following up 3 to 4 times. They're the ones that are getting in front of the most investors in the most meetings. Can we go to the next slide?
I believe that's it. Yeah,
that's it. That's all there is to it. And there's still plenty of time on the platform for June. The conference starts on the 8th, but there's plenty of investors with availability. We've added, I think yesterday there was 12. I think today I've seen that there's like nearly 15. So we're adding fresh investors daily. And if you get on, you sign up today, you create your profile, you find your targeted list of investors, and I could if you do, I can help you out and find that list, and then you just send out that request, and then you send a follow-up tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday, message on Monday. I think you can expect to get in that ballpark of 16 or 17 meetings, if not more.
Greg, you want to read the questions?
Yeah, so we have a few questions tonight. There's one comment that in reality, it takes 5 to 10 years to raise money, and you have to be persistent and convinced that you have an outstanding product.
5 to 10 years.
Do you want to comment on that?
Well, we've been doing this for 8 years, and we've seen a lot of companies and spoke to a lot of companies. So we're going to stick with the 9 to 18 months for each round that you're doing. If you want to take it all the way through phase 3 in commercialization, yeah, I'll agree with that.
Okay, another question is, what is the cost to get access to the investor database?
The investor database costs $6,995 a year. And if you go to a RESI conference and you buy a premium subscription, which is $250, you can get all of the deep mandate information that's in our database off of the RESI conference premium price. So that would mean when you buy the database, you get 5,000 investors. If you go to the RESI conference and you wanted to get the premium, you would pay an extra $250 and you'd get the 400 or 450. So we see a lot of people doing that because that can really help get a really good subset. Like if you're a drug therapeutic, there's probably 150 investors that are there that you should get on your radar screen. So we see a lot of people use that as kind of like plan A and see how that works for them.
Yep, it's actually $500. The premium partnering, $500. But you get all of the detailed information from the profiles that we saw earlier, and the email contact information for those investors. And at this conference next week, we have about 450 investors registered, so it's pretty valuable. There's a question about the follow-up, Eric, that you mentioned, about what a big difference it makes to follow up in the partnering. Do we have any statistics on how many additional meetings you can actually get by following up versus just having a compelling initial request?
Yeah, I don't have hard statistics, but it's clear that when we look at the past 30 conferences that we've done, if you send out that initial meeting request, if you have a solid profile and your message, your branding is right, you have a really great tagline, and you send out that initial request with your intro message, you're looking at, if your initial list of the targets is in the ballpark of 50 or 60, you're likely to get three meetings off the bat. If you double that initial target list and you're over 100, then you initially could think about getting like 5 right off of just sending the request. But it's in the follow-up that sending the 3-4 follow-ups where now you're going to get 15 to 20 meetings doing that, going through that process. At some point, I believe we will have hard statistics if we go back and look at all the conferences and you're able to pull that data together, we get solid numbers.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of anecdotal information, right? I mean, we know how the investors go about it because we ask them. And then we talk to the CEOs, some who are disappointed, and we say, well, what happened? And they go, well, I just made one. We say, send us the message you sent, and the message doesn't make any sense, or it's too little information. And then we talk to the folks who have really gone after it. So a lot of it's anecdotal, but the investors say they need to be able to look at the request, and based on the request, how it's put together, they can pretty much tell whether they want to meet with the person. And then they're busy. We have over 300 fundraising CEOs going after X amount of investors this time. So they really see a lot of stuff. So you really need to follow up. I mean, in the world of sales and marketing, everything is a numbers game, and you always got to go for it. Greg, is there another question? Or are we done?
Are there any more questions? That's all we have for now. Would
Great
anyone else
questions,
like
by the way.
to
Thank
add a
you.
question?
This is Sylvia
Okay,
Norman. Hello.
Hey, Sylvia.
Yep, hi.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to add, because I did I participated in the April RESI partnering, and I'd say I got an extra 50% meetings with investors by doing the follow-up. And even some that didn't want to have a meeting did connect with me as a result of my following up with them.
So how many meetings did you have, Sylvia?
I ended up with 7. I joined late, so I ended up with 7. But
okay. But that's good.
But
that's a good start, right?
Yeah,
were any of the meetings any good?
Doing the follow-up.
Were any of the meetings good?
Yeah, I had a couple that were very, very good.
To hear. Good. Glad it's working for you. Any other questions? Okay, well, you have our emails and contact information. Don't hesitate to give us a call or send us an email, and we'd love to have a chat with you sometime. So thank you all very much for tonight. We really appreciate the time.